Hey, so today we're going to go over some watercolor painting supplies for beginners. These are some of the things that I wish I knew when I first started, and I had to do a lot of research and trial and error. So let's get started. We'll just talk about maybe the very basics, and then we will go into some of the more interesting things like paper, paints, and that sort of thing. So you're gonna need to start off with water jar. You can, if you have extra cups, whatever you have in your house, that's fine, use that. You can use one or you can use two jars. I tend to use one, and I just more frequently change out to have clean water. But if you use two jars, then you have to change it less often, so it's up to you. And you're gonna want pencil, eraser, and some masking tape, nothing fancy. And then you're gonna want paper towel. You can use cloth as well, it's up to you. So those are your basics in terms of just random items. And then your more important fun items are going to be the paints, brushes, and your paper. So we'll talk about brushes first. You can surprisingly get away with a limited amount of brushes, especially when you first start. I probably used, when I first started, 3 brushes. Just kind of a large one, a medium one, and then a small. And they're round brushes. The ones that I have here are sizes 10, 8, 6, and a 2. So just a variety of sizes will do you good. And then later on I invested in a flat brush as well, which came in really handy for backgrounds and stuff. And with brushes, don't feel obligated to go out and spend $20–30 on one brush, because they can get that expensive. I'd recommend just getting a variety pack. Student quality is fine to start out with. Yeah. And then next is paints. So when I first started, I went with a student grade paint set that I found on Amazon. It's actually a Japanese watercolor. And years ago when I got it off Amazon, I think I paid 35 bucks. And sorry, I just got paint all over my hands. And these watercolors are vibrant, and you get so many colors. I don't remember how many you get in here, but for the price point, this is fantastic. There's a variety of different Japanese watercolors on Amazon, and I've tried a few of them. Definitely worth the price point. The only thing is, I'm from Canada, and my I have limited things in which I can get off Amazon, it seems, and so the replacement pans for these I could never find. And I know they exist, and I think that you can get them out of the US, but I could never get them. So basically, when I started running out of my favorite colors, because there's some colors I basically never touched, and then there's other ones I used up. So I had to look at other options after I couldn't get the replacement pans. So I started looking at tubed watercolors to be able to replace the pans with. And so they come as kind of a viscous liquid, and then you just put it in the pans, and they dry solid, and then you just re-wet them with water and a brush. So I tried a few different brands. As I became more advanced in some of my painting, I ended up really enjoying the Daniel Smith watercolors. I actually have a whole bin here. They can be quite expensive. They're an artist grade watercolor, but they are fantastic. The color is vibrant. They last a really long time. I think a lot of the tubes that I have are about $20 a tube, so they can get a bit pricey. And I obviously didn't buy them all at once. Over time, as I used up the colors in here, I would buy a replacement color. But they have other brands that have the tubes that are a bit better in price in terms of a beginner. So if you're looking at going for the route eventually of the watercolor tubes, there's better pricing than $20 a tube. And so I actually, once I got my collection kind of started to grow in the Daniel Smith brand, I moved to these metal tins, and you can actually get these little half pans, and then you just fill up with the watercolor. And I really liked this. I actually got this one on Amazon, but I found out my my supply of colors grew quite a bit quite quickly, and so I ended up upgrading to the larger size, and this is the one I use now. I also got this one off of Amazon. I'll link all of the products in the box below, but yeah, so this is the one I use now. I have 5 empty pans here, so I can still have room to grow, and I simply just mix all of my colors on the sides here. I did have a watercolor mixing palette, which was only a couple bucks, but I find it annoying to have too many supplies on my table when I'm painting, so I really prefer as minimalistic as I can. And if you're not out to spend a lot of money, by all means, don't get a palette. When I started out using this, I actually used the plastic lid that came with it as my mixing palette. So yeah, and you get to another thing I really love about these tins is that the color palette is very customizable. So once you get a little more advanced and have a better understanding of color, you can put together your own color palette, which I really like. So next, lastly, is paper. So with the other supplies like brushes and paints, you really can get away with I would say student grade qualities to start with. Paper, on the other hand, is one item that I would recommend not buying the cheapest thing you can find. And the reason is that the paper that's generally fairly cheap is often very thin, and it's more of a deterrent from the painting process. It can buckle, it warps, it doesn't hold the paint very well, and you end up just getting frustrated in the very beginning and possibly just quitting. So I would recommend, out of all the items, definitely go for kind of a mid to higher quality paper. And so what I started out with was a variety of watercolor sketchbooks, and they come in different thicknesses, and the thicknesses are represented in pounds. So a really light, flimsy paper would be about 90 pounds. And then the number you really want to, I would not go lower than about 120 pound paper. The one that I use for an everyday basis now is 140 pounds. And it's a bit kind of an artist grade quality. Fantastic. It is a bit more expensive, but you can get lower price points with that same thickness. It's just different brands. Yeah, so I started off with just simple watercolor sketchbooks, which was great. Just make sure you get that thickness and sturdiness. Don't go for the cheapest, thinnest thing, or you're, like I said, you're just gonna get frustrated. And another key thing to look out for is watercolor paper comes in both hot press and cold press finishes. When I first started out, I actually went and painted a lot on hot press, which is a smoother finish. The cold press is kind of a rougher finish. I'm not sure why. I actually prefer cold press paper now. I like the rough texture, and it makes very beautiful watercolor paintings. I pretty much will never paint with hot press paper anymore. Apparently you can get better, finer details with hot press, but I find that the cold press paper is more versatile, definitely. So for the brands I've used, in the beginning I used a lot of like Strathmore. There's a handful of brands that are pretty typical you can get from Amazon or your local craft or art supply store, and those are fine. Just, I would recommend, if you're first starting out, honestly go with cold press, and then look for paper that's about 130 to 140 pounds. And then you should be okay. I really prefer the pads that are actually glued on all sides. And what that basically does is it keeps, so this one, the one I use quite regularly, it's glued on all four sides. And that way I don't have to tape my paper down. I don't have my own studio right now, so I'm often bringing out my art supplies to my kitchen table and using and painting for a couple hours and then putting them away. So if I had my own studio, I might consider taping down my paper, and then I could just leave it, walk away, but I don't have that option right now. So I really love the paper blocks for that reason. Yeah. Anyways, I think that's about it for beginner supplies. There's obviously more advanced supplies that you can get, but for beginners, you're really looking at your paints, your brushes, and papers. That's really your core items that you want, and then obviously your pencil, eraser, jars, but those I feel like most people have around their house. Yeah, so if you have any questions, just leave them down in the comments below and I'll try to answer them. And if you're interested in more of a more in-depth, kind of advanced watercolor supply video, let me know, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.